Hey y'all, Coaching the Fight here. Just doing a short class on the new moon and how David proved that the new moon actually starts the new month. Okay, so we're looking here in First Samuel and in chapter 20. And I just want to share with you a few verses that proves this point. And that point is that each month, talking about the sacred months, actually start with the new moon, and the days of the week correspond to that new moon and when it was sighted. In other words, we start calculating the days of the week based on when the new moon is sighted. Okay, so we're looking at a few verses here. We're going to start at verse 5. It says, "And David said unto Jonathan, Behold, tomorrow is the new moon, and I should not fail to sit with the king at meat. But let me go, that I may hide myself in the field until the third day at even." Now, okay, so here, just a little bit of background. This is David in fear of his life from King Saul. By this time, King Saul had been possessed by evil spirits, and all he wanted to do was kill David, who had by now been made the new king of Jerusalem. It's just that, Saul was still alive, that, David hasn't fully taken the reins yet. But anyway, that David was his servant, and so he was expected to be at the new moon celebration. But what we see here is that David is trying to get out of this new moon celebration in fear of his life. He's telling Jonathan, Saul's son, to let me not have to come to this new moon dinner, because if I do, your father, your daddy, the king, is going to kill me. Now, one of the main points that we want to pull out of this verse is, notice how he says, tomorrow is the new moon. Now, knowing how the new moon works, it actually requires the sighting of the sliver of the moon for it to, be proclaimed throughout the community by the Levites or the priests. They would have had to go out there and seen that new moon. You can only really see it about an hour after sunset on one day out of the month. So for David to be saying with a surety that tomorrow is the new moon, what that's telling us is that this is the evening that the new moon was sighted, and David is telling Jonathan, or confirming to Jonathan, that tomorrow is what they would call the Rosh Chodesh, or the new moon day, or the celebration day. That day when, everybody would come together. It's kind of like a holy convocation where people would come together. They would have dinner parties. It's not really a work day at all. It's more of a worship day, being the first day of the month. It's like when you read over in Ezekiel chapter 46, and we'll come over here and look at it. It's verse 1 out of Ezekiel in 46. It talks about how the inner court is opened during the new moon celebration. We see that, that's only opened on the new moon and on the Sabbath day. So what we understand from this is that the first day of the month, or the new moon day, would actually be a very special day. And so that's what David is talking about when he's saying tomorrow is the new moon. He's talking about that whole day in which everybody would have been resting, worshiping. Even we're going to see here that they even had a kind of a dinner party. But now also notice that David is saying that not only does he want to miss the new moon day, the Rosh Chodesh, the first day of the month, but he doesn't want to really come back until the third day. Okay. Okay, now the next verse that we'll look at is down in verse 18. It says, "Then Jonathan said to David, Tomorrow is the new moon, and thou shalt be missed, because thy seat will be empty." So both of them understand and are speaking with seemingly 100% a surety that tomorrow is the new moon. So like we said before, they would have by then had some type of verification. They can't be going off of calculations or anything like that, because they're so sure. They're not saying we think tomorrow is the new moon or tomorrow is probably the new moon. They're both saying, David said it and Jonathan said, that tomorrow is the new moon. Okay, so let's jump down to verse 24. It says, so David hid himself in the field, and when the new moon was come, the king sat down to eat. Okay, so now again, this is actually talking about the first day of the month, the new moon day. The way this all works, they would have had the sighting of the new moon the day before. Let's go over and let's look at a calendar right quick. This is for the month of February 2021. We're actually expecting this new moon on this sighting of the new moon on the 12th of February of 2021. So that would have been a day when they're having this conversation. It would have been what we know as the 30th day of the 11th month, and or Shevat 30. So when they would have been having this conversation in the evening time, because they're sure that the next day would actually be the first day of the month. Okay, let's come back over to the verses here. Now, one thing that I do want to bring out here is how this first day of the month, how the king sat down to eat meat. So he's sitting down to dinner, and he's expecting a lot of guests to be with him. But we have to remember, back in those days, this dinner would have taken place in the daylight hours. It wouldn't have been at nighttime. They didn't do anything at night, unlike today when we have street lights that let us see at night, and house lights that let us do stuff at night, and headlights that we can drive at night, and flashlights that we can walk around. They really didn't have a lot of artificial lighting, and they did not do a lot of stuff at night. They would have been shut down. So this dinner would have been taking place during the daylight hours on the first day of the month. Now, let's look down at verse 27. It says, and it came to pass on the morrow, which was the second day of the month, that David's place was empty. And Saul said unto Jonathan his son, wherefore cometh not the son of Jesse to meet, neither yesterday nor today? So when we scroll back up, what we see is that the king was missing David during the new moon celebration. When they was having this dinner party, the king was looking for David, but David was missing. It says that the king didn't say anything, because he just assumed that there was good reason why David had missed this dinner party, so he really didn't say anything. But then that would have been the first day of the month. The new moon day is always the first day of the month. But then you see down in verse 27, where we have passed the new moon day, he says, on the morrow, which was the second day of the month. So this right here, in this verse right here, it proves the monthly cycles is based on the lunar, is based on the moon. There's no other way to reckon the days of the month except for the timing of the moon, when the new moon comes. Today there's many kinds of calendars. You have Enoch calendars. You have a lot of people claiming to have Enoch calendars. They basically got their own calendar and calling it an Enoch calendar. You got Gregorian calendars. You got Japanese. You got all kinds of calendars out there. But there's really only one sacred calendar, and the only way to keep track of that calendar is by way of the moon. If the calendar that you're using or the calendar that you're looking at departs from the moon cycle at any time, it's no longer considered a sacred calendar at all. It's somebody's made up calendar. And they'll usually tell you that. They'll say, God told me this by way of a dream, that, I'm the only person in the world that's going to be able to have the correct calendar, and you guys got to come to my web page and download it. That it's when you think about that kind of stuff, it really doesn't make sense that our Father, who has taken the time to give us the scripture. He's taken the time to give us the sun and the moon and the rest of the stars, will now rely on some dude on some YouTube channel to, be the only person in the world that really knows how to calculate the true calendar or whatever. That don't make sense at all. So when you look at the calendar that the Jewish community goes by, I know they get a bad rap a lot of times because, they seem to be lenient when it comes to a lot of the rules that they go by. When it comes to the calendar, guys, they're pretty spot on, and the reason why is that the calendar is usually based on numbers. You can come up with it. You can actually find an equation that will predict the sacred calendar out for several years. It's because mathematics don't lie. It doesn't lie. So when it comes to the calendar, when it comes to the Jewish calendar, which the majority of the world goes by, those guys they're pretty accurate. Pretty accurate at all. And to have that Jewish community and the rest of the world, billions of people around the world are following this lunar calendar every single year, going all the way back to the time of Messiah. To be wrong, like I said, with one little YouTube channel being the only people that understand this is, it's kind of ludicrous. But anyway, it says here that the morrow after the new moon is the second day of the week, or the second day of the month, and that's how the month is calculated every day, every month. Come back over to our calendar, we'll see, you just using this as an example, the 13th day of February in 2021 would be what we consider new moon day. That's the day that David was talking about when he said tomorrow is the new moon. And so that following day, the 14th, will be day 2, the second day of the month. And the 15th of February will be day 3. And that is how the sacred months are calculated every single month all throughout the year. The sun is used to determine when the year starts, but the month is determined by the lunar cycle. You don't use the sun to determine the months at all. No way, shape, form, or fashion. The word month actually comes from the word moon. You just, add another O in there, you would get month. That's actually the same thing. But anyway, let's come back over here, see if there's anything else here. It says, and that David's place was empty, and Saul said unto Jonathan his son, wherefore cometh not the son of Jesse to meet, neither yesterday nor today? So that will be the first day, which was the new moon day, or the second day, which is today. He's not here today either. Verse 34 says, so Jonathan arose from the table in fierce anger, and did not eat the second day of the month, for he was grieved for David, because his father had done him shame. This is pretty much, after King Saul threw a spear at Jonathan, letting Jonathan know that he was dead serious, that he was actually going to kill Saul. Jonathan was kind of making excuses and thinking that there was a way that, Saul wasn't serious. Well, he by now has proven to Jonathan that, yeah, he is actually serious, and he's definitely want to kill him. But again, notice it's talking about the second day. Then verse 35 says, and it came to pass in the morning that Jonathan went out into the field at the appointed time, and a little lad with him. So you had basically the Saul threw the spear at Jonathan on the second day of the month, and here now Jonathan has waited till the morning after the second day of the month, and he's gone out to the field to meet with David. And so this would actually be the third day of the month. But if you remember, the conversation that they had back up there at the beginning, that's the time when they had set up. You see in verse 12 that they had decided that they was going to meet on the third day of the month was going to be the time in which they would, get together and they would have this meeting. It says that there in verse 5 too, that I may hide myself in the field until the third day. Okay, and so he was going to hide into the field until the evening of the third day. But we see down here in verse 35 that Jonathan went out there early in the morning. Well, it just says in the morning, doesn't really say early, but he went out there in the morning, him and a lad, in order to let David know that King Saul is after you. He's definitely going to kill you. And so he gave him the warning, and David was actually able to flee. So when we're looking over here at our calendar, if this had all went down in February of 2021, the first initial meeting would have been on the 12th. That's when he would have been telling Jonathan would have been telling David, and David would have been telling Jonathan, tomorrow is the new moon, and the 13th would be the new moon, just like it is this month. That's when, my family and I, we will have a rest day. It'll be a worship day. A lot of times we'll have special dinner parties, especially when, invited guests will come by and share a meal with us. It'll, be a special occasion or whatever, but it's definitely not a work day, but we'll cover that in another video. But that was the day. The 13th would have been the day when Saul missed him. He didn't really say anything, but he just missed him at that new moon celebration because he knew that David should have been there. Then on the 14th day, which would have been, according to what we're seeing here, Adar 2. It doesn't tell us what month that all of this went down over in the book of Samuel. But in February, it'll be Adar, the second day of the 12th month. Adar was when King Saul finally spoke up and said, where this guy at? He didn't come yesterday and he ain't here today. Where is he at? And, that's when Jonathan said, what do you have against him? He ain't did you no wrong anyway. And Saul threw the spear at him, letting him know that he was serious. And then Jonathan, he didn't go out that day because that was the second day. The agreement that was that David would hide in the field until the third day. Well, it was on the morning of the third day, it would have been the morning of the 15th, that Jonathan went out there to the field and let David know that, you really need to flee, because if you come back here, Saul is definitely going to kill you. So this confirms the monthly cycle according to the lunar cycle. We did a similar thing with Noah. And you can do it all over the scripture, guys. The month is what sets the moon. I mean, the moon is what sets the month. Every year, since Adam and through the end of time, every month, every sacred month, that is, has always been determined based on the moon. And if anybody, shows you a calendar and their first day of the sacred month doesn't start with the new moon, it's not an Enoch calendar. It's not a sacred calendar. It's them and their own calendar. But like I said, they'll usually tell you that when they'll say me and I, 50 times in their video, the Lord showed me this and the Lord showed me that. They'll make it clear that it's their own creation, their own concoction, and, to me, it always seems odd that, they can be so arrogant that they think that, the other 7 billion people in the world got this thing wrong, while the Father has somehow, given them this information, without even a really good platform to speak it out. They're only getting, few 100,000 views on their channel, while the rest of the world, the rest of the 7 billion people in the world are ignorant because they haven't subscribed to their channel yet. So, the thing about the calendars that are in place, the Jewish calendar is actually right in this. When they talk about when the month starts, they're right in this. So, all right, I just wanted to share that with you guys. If you got anything out of this video, go ahead and hit the like button. And if you didn't, hit the dislike button. But leave us a comment either way. And shalom.